And my favorite restaurant is the Odyssey. Now, some of you will know the Odyssey. It was one of the first restaurants that I was taken to when I first came to Los Angeles. And it's continued to be a favorite. It's also been the place where I have made some landmarks in my life. It was a place I took Carlos on a date one evening. It's a beautiful restaurant, overlooks the valley, and it's a nice place. It's a nice place. And so one of the things we had not done together was we had not gone to brunch on either Saturday or Sunday. And part of that reason is because brunch is served until about 2 o'clock, and it's really difficult sometimes for me to get out of here and drive the 20 or 30 miles up to Woodland Hills and get there before last seating. And, you know, if any of you have ever been to one of those brunches, you know that if you don't get there for last seating, there's not really much food to chew. And I was doing an experiment on gluttony. So I wanted to get my real field education in here. So last Sunday, we managed to be able to get out of here in a swift time and drove off to the Odyssey. And, well, let me tell you this experience. So you walk in to Odyssey, and the first thing that hits you is this huge array of desserts. It's like a sugar feast. There is every type of dessert you could think of, and they are all lined up right in front of you. Now, I didn't quite understand why they didn't start with, you know, the breakfast items, but there we go. Perhaps they were teasing you for about what you were going to have at the end, but it was just this amazing array of desserts. And then you walk just a little bit further in, and there is this station where they will cook every omelette that you could possibly think of, with some of the, you know, extravagant ingredients, scallops. I'm hungry. Oh. This is a feast. I mean, it's just every kind of omelette you could think of, and then they will also go even further and cook a pasta dish. Is that right? Did I say that correctly this morning? Pasta. No, sorry, pasta. Pasta. Every type of pasta dish that you could possibly think of. And then you walk just a little bit further, and there is this huge array of salmon and prawns and bagels and lox and just this huge array of over here. And then just a little bit further, you've got a whole selection of Mexican tacos and burritos, and then just a little bit further around, and you've got this whole stir-fry Asian cuisine. And then, I know, did I tell you it's my favorite restaurant in Los Angeles? Yeah. We're going to get through the food part in just a minute, I promise you. And then right down the center aisle, I'm nearly through, but right down the center aisle is every kind of breakfast thing you could think of, sausage and bacon and eggs Benedict and And the great thing about this is that they also serve samosas and champagne. Now, it's okay for me to drink champagne and samosas. I know for others it's not, and but samosas and champagne. So we were there for a couple of hours in field education, research, tax deductible, Valentine's Day brunch. And because we were a little bit later, and so, people were starting to leave, but we could hear this other table who was kind of next to us, and they've obviously been to their brunch at the Odyssey before, because they had it all mapped out that you towards the end, when things are clearing up, that's when you go and get several plates and just put it on your table, regardless of whether you're going to eat it or not. And so they had this huge selection of desserts on their table. And That's not to say we didn't either, but, you know. So here we are. So at the end of this amazing feast, and I didn't eat for the rest of the day or the next morning. But I was suddenly aware as we were coming to the end that there was an awful lot of food left over. And, you know, conscience kicks in, right? You know, no matter how much of a good time you're having, conscience still kicks in. I know that it does for me. I know it does for others. And I said to the waitress, you know, could we have a doggy bag? Because we hadn't eaten everything that was on the table. And she said, no, you're not allowed to have a doggy bag to take food home. Yeah, what? So I said to her, I said, so what happens to all this food? And she said, well, we just dispose of it. And at that point, my whole conscience is really kicking, thinking, you know, what could I do with this amount of food just about to be thrown away? And started to think about this whole sermon around gluttony and about abstinence. And not that I was giving myself a guilt trip about being at the Odyssey. It's my favorite hotel in my favorite Los Angeles, if I haven't already told you that. But I was very mindful of, out of this abundance that I had just shared in, there were others who were not going to get any food that day. And that out of this abundance that was still left over, no one was going to benefit from it because it just was about to be thrown into the trash. And I started to question my own self, started to question my own thought process, my own theology about what it is that really we've been called to do in this whole message of Lent and giving up and gluttony and abstinence. And I think that what I came to the conclusion of in this list, again, not around guilt and shame, but around the amount of abundance there is in this world and how much we waste and how those who are less fortunate than ourselves, when we had, you know, the luxury of being able to be at the Odyssey, that others were not able to even put enough on their table for food that day. And I tell us that story not because I want to whet your appetite, or certainly whetted mine, but I tell you that story because I think that that really speaks to the heart of the message for us today, is that it's not about us refusing ourselves some of the pleasures in life. It's not about saying that you can't go to a buffet, or it's not saying that you can't do the moments in your life where we've all perhaps been a little extravagant. But it does challenge us to say, well, if there is an abundance for me, how do I use that abundance to ensure that somebody who's less fortunate than myself gets to benefit from that as well? How do I ensure that in my extravagance on that day, that the folks in Skid Row still get fed? Then the extravagance of that day, how do I ensure spiritually that the programs of our own church continue to be funded? That the programs of our own church that minister to those less fortunate than ourselves still get everything that they need, and making sure that people get food on their plate. And I really believe that in this 7 deadly sin, I think what God is trying to teach us is that we must make sure that what we have must have enough to share with somebody else who's less fortunate than we are.